Welcome to the Ellevate podcast, conversations with women changing the face of business. And now your hosts, Kristy, Wallace, and Maricella, Herrera.
Hello and welcome to the Ellevate podcast. This is your host, Kristy Wallace, with my co-host, Maricella Herrera. Maricella, I was trying really hard to get Morgan and Zoe on the podcast today. I know they missed you a lot, but they were lured away by tablets.
I miss the kiddos. Haven't seen them in so long and haven't talked to them. They're going to be teenagers by the next time I see them, it feels like.
No. We will see you way before that. But I know you and I oftentimes talk about the unpleasantness of being very cold in New York City during this time. So maybe as soon as it starts to warm up, we're overdue for maybe an outdoor visit or something.
Yeah, I'm pretty over winter. I need my sunshine and my warmth and my summer months and my tropical weather. Starting to feel a little bit more like Eeyore than any other Winnie the Pooh character lately. And I blame the weather for it.
I always appreciate your affinity for children's storybook characters, Maricella.
I have tattoos of them because that is how much I think they're wonderful. The Little Prince and Winnie the Pooh.
Well, my sister-in-law texted me yesterday and was like, hey, would you want to go to an island somewhere for Thanksgiving? And I immediately was like, yes. But that still feels very far away. So I don't know. We're gonna have to.
I'll up you one on planning for the future. Yesterday, I signed up to run a half marathon in Miami for next February.
Oh, but that's exciting.
Yeah, a friend of mine signed up, and I haven't seen her in a while, and she doesn't live in the U.S., so we're gonna go meet up in Miami and run a half, which should be fun.
I love that. So we recently had a Mobilize Women event. I hope many of our listeners tuned in. If you haven't, it's something to certainly experience. We do Mobilize Women every year. It's a week-long experience we have in June. But then throughout the year, we also have individual touch points where we're having important conversations and bringing our community together to mobilize for change. In our recent conversation, our speakers were talking about this idea of I'm COVID okay, or I'm pandemic okay. And the feelings during this time of, just how we're getting through the day and how we're appreciating what we have, but also recognizing that there's a lot of struggles, there's a lot of challenges. And so to talk about your half marathon, Maricella, I one just love that idea of physical fitness and keeping yourself motivated. I know that's something really important to you, but also something to look forward to. What can we look forward to? What is that experience, that trip, that plan that I think is really important and something that's been missing for many of us.
Absolutely agree. Yeah, I'm trying to do that more, like look forward to things and even do my own deadlines. I told you I'm currently training for a half, but it's a virtual half. It's not going to be what I would have liked my first half marathon to be, because my first one was going to be last year when it got canceled in New York. But having that, like a deadline, a goal that I'm working towards, and something to look forward to, just it helps motivate, I think.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And when we think about our speaker for today, or the interview for today, that's a lot of things that she talks about. So Chana Ginelle Ewing, who's the founder of GEENIE, she's phenomenal and just incredibly passionate about creating progress and change, about having important conversations regarding, where we came from, the systems and structures that were central to, business and societal foundations, and how we need to intentionally review them, dismantle them, tackle them in order to move forward. In order to look at the future, you have to first reckon with the past. And I was inspired and moved by so much of what she talked about, and the work that she's doing every day through GEENIE and through her activism to really amplify this conversation, and to look at how businesses and entrepreneurs and business leaders can be at the forefront of moving things forward, as long as they continue to reckon with what's happened in the past.
I'm very much looking forward to listening to your conversation. I always try to. I'm a true believer that those who don't know their history are bound to repeat it, and understanding the past to how we're going to reinvent the future is key. So this is I'm looking forward to hearing what Chana has to say.
Excellent. Well, let's get to my conversation now, and we'll see all of you back here next week for the Ellevate podcast. Chana, I'm so excited for our audience to learn more about you and how you got to where you are today and your impact. There is a sentence on your site that says she believes that identity is a lever to pull to unlock human potential, and entrepreneurship is an opportunity to make dents that move culture forward. You have so much experience and impact as we talk about building communities, building awareness, being an entrepreneur, and changing the conversation around equity and equality. That it is a true honor to have you here today, and I would love for you to share a little bit more about you and your story with our listeners.
Thanks so much for having me, Kristy. I love that you brought out that sentence. That really is about this idea that I think that a lot of humanities folks should go into entrepreneurship. So, my background, I studied African American studies and media studies in college. And the way that I've thought about business is through this culture lens, and through the opportunity to bring people together and to start conversations using the transaction of goods and services. And normally, I think a lot of people typically, we go into entrepreneurship because, oh, there's an opportunity, opportunity to make money, or, you want to do the thing that you love all the time. And so, really, I think that another way that you can look at entrepreneurship is as an opportunity to push society forward and to push ideas into the zeitgeist. And so that's why I sort of start that. I open up that conversation in my bio, really, and just thinking about like how I'm looking at the work that I do.
And I absolutely agree. We Elevate's a B Corp, and so we think a lot about businesses as a force for good, and what are the ways in which we redefine business as for me, it's okay, who are your customers? What problems are you solving? And how can you do that in a way that's not just, to your point, like transactional and about profits and shareholder supremacy, but about the ways that businesses and communities interact, and how we really lead these businesses and we create businesses as entrepreneurs to solve problems, and to solve problems that have a greater societal and world impact. I know, Chana, you are the founder of GEENIE Beauty. What was the impetus for that? I mean, how did this come about? Share a little bit about your founder story with our community.
Yeah, so as you from the what you just pointed out was really excellent around a little bit about the B Corp and the social impact space, which is, as you mentioned, using business as a force for good, using business to solve a problem that people really truly have, and not just pushing consumption for consumption's sake. But the thing that I'm thinking about here when I'm talking about from the humanities perspective is like also like how do we use business to change narratives like how do we use business to help us think about who we are as people and how we interact with each other. So sometimes, like some of the foundational narratives around like this, how this country has been built, racism and white supremacy and systemic oppression, these are like layered in the water and in the foundation of the society that we live in. And if we only approach business from the lens of like, okay, we want to use it as a force for good, then we may actually miss out on the opportunity to actually just shift perspectives altogether around who we are, and like push different narratives into the world. And the reason why I want to say that is because I think that oftentimes what you'll see is that like people that have the best of intentions, will create things and the with like, with the idea that like they really want to support people, they really want to give back, or they really want to create space. But if you're not unpacking power and privilege and how that impacts the work that you do, then you are not necessarily going to have the impact that you truly want to make, because you're not actually going at the core of the constructs that we're all living under. And so in terms of how we think about Genie, we're building this business with the full intention of rewriting a beauty narrative that centers whiteness, and it centers able-bodied folks, it centers cisgendered folks, it centers, there's like a normalizing of what beauty has been. And so, yeah, there's this, we're introducing new products, and we also want to, spotlight BIPOC and queer and women-owned businesses and make sure that folks are making more money. But what undergirds that is a real intention around just undoing harmful narratives that people have understood to be what beauty is in society.
And thank you, Chana, for that and for the work that you do. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, we tend to approach business and the work that we do through our own lens. And that is too narrowly defined. If we're not putting in the work to really understand what's come before us and how we change that in the future, and how we acknowledge and recognize that. I mean, I'll say personally, when I came in as CEO of Ellevate, I was thinking through the lens of a white heterosexual woman in the workplace. And that is not inclusive of everyone in our community, nor is it going to truly solve the challenge of equity and equality if you don't just, put in the work to really recognize, what got us to where we are today, and truly what needs to happen to move us forward. And I'm thankful for you for bringing that up and for really talking about humanity centered entrepreneurship, because it's an important aspect of challenging entrepreneurs and those that have power to recognize that and to put in the work to be intentional about how we incorporate that into what we do every day.
It's like, and I'm not I'm not an activist by any means, but in activist circles, they talk about, liberation and what does like liberation look like? People benefit within society, right? Because of their privilege, right? So white folks benefit from white supremacy, cisgender folks benefit from, heteronormativity, right? So people benefit from the oppressions that we're in. But at the same time, like those oppressions truly aren't really good for anyone, right? Like they're not like, so what may look like a benefit outwardly truly, has you constricted in some way. Like the patriarchy as a whole, is going to impact everyone, white supremacy is going to impact everyone. Like these systems, though they may seem like, they have real benefits for certain folks, at the end of the day, they truly are, grotesque systems that negatively impact us all in some way or another. And so it's in everyone's benefit to decide to be anti-racist. It's in everyone's benefit to, actively decide to tear down the patriarchy. Like that's just like in everyone's interest. And in terms of, how that translates to business, it's like, well, there are businesses who are building with particular consumers in mind and are centering them and are spotlighting them. And so, for instance, with GEENIE, like we we're a marketplace that's shown up for the businesses that are already out there. That's how we always like to put it. Like we didn't come along and like, be like, oh, let's just have a marketplace that's thinking about intersectionality. No, we're doing that because there are already businesses that exist that are thinking about, skin inclusivity, or that are thinking about, disability and beauty, or that are thinking about, centering trans and non-binary folks, right? So there are already these businesses that are catering and supporting these niche audiences. And from our perspective, it's like, how do we create an economies of scale around it, and how do we bring a bigger community together that's thinking about culture writ large.
So you built GEENIE as well to be a community, right? To have these conversations, to create more support, to do more to not just be a marketplace, but to also be a driver of conversations, of awareness. And why was that an aspect that you wanted to incorporate in GEENIE? Like, what do you think in terms of community and how that also impacts the way that we build businesses, and that we really be intentional about how we're changing the conversation?
Yeah, so for us, like community was super important because we're like explicitly going into some of the stickier, hard conversations, and like we wanted to create this brand that is unapologetic and is like, that creates space for different folks to feel like to feel seen and to feel heard, right? So in doing that, that means that like we need to create a little bit of safety. We need to create ways in which the community could talk to each other, because we're by no means like experts, and we're not experts, we're not activists, we're not, educators. you know in some ways we're doing all of those things to an extent, but we're not like, that's not like the business model, right? And so we needed to be able to like, since we are opening up space and we are enabling people to have those conversations, the you know the best way to do that would be to create some safety, and to create a place where people could feel like they could chat with each other, and that they also not only meet each other and like, you know um, like dive into racism and sexism or anything like that, but also just see that there are other folks who are, as interested and as excited to talk about diversity and beauty, that are as like, jazzed up about meeting that new brand, right? And so, and then like going on this journey and like with other makeup lovers and other beauty lovers. So, we thought that it would be a great opportunity to just like bring folks together. And in a lot of ways, because we are looking at a couple of different like, in a lot of ways, you know these groups have been siloed in some ways, right? So there's like the clean beauty folks, and then there's like, the black owned folks, and then there's like, folks who are interested in sustainability, right? And there's definitely some roads that cross each other with all of those different communities, but the ways in which they've been marketed to have been like in these like really really specific silos. So if we could create like a square where they could all meet and see like what the shared vision is, and for us that shared vision looks like actually just moving culture forward. So we've just decided that like that's like how we're going to talk about like what are we all here to do, which is to move culture forward. And how we're going to do that, we're going to do that through this community lens. So that made sense for our brand and what we're trying to build. But I think in general, community is great because it just like it enables like your um, audience to have some investment in what it is that you're building, and be in an ongoing conversation with you around that. So they're not just there as like passive consumers that get it on like once the thing is done, and then now you're trying to sell them something, right? They've seen the journey, they're a part of the journey, they're a part of the conversation. And so they have more of an investment in that conversation. And you also get to get some, you as the business get insights on like what it is that they're looking for, what they need, what's working, what isn't working. So I'm really bullish on community as like the way forward, for all different types of business models.
I find your perspective really refreshing. And I say that because in the past couple of years, community has become kind of a buzzword, right? And in many ways, that's great. In a world that many times feels so divided, and particularly in the past couple of months, finding places where you can feel accepted, feel seen and heard, feel supported really matters. It's important. But I say it's become a buzzword because it's oftentimes other brands, if it's a financial institution or a media company, talk about creating community, and sometimes it feels like it's just a way to kind of sell their product, or a way to keep people loyal, versus a way to really further the conversation, to tie it to your mission as an organization. And how do you tap into community as a way to keep that mission moving forward and evolving? Because we know it's not, it's a living, breathing thing, and our communities are living and breathing. And to really see the full impact of the vision you've created, it's about continuing to engage with your community around that shared vision, to keep the conversations moving forward, to really ensure that people are supported, and seen and heard, so that you are not just about maybe selling a product or being a marketplace, but you're about creating change. And that's something so much bigger. That's something so much more substantial. And when you talk about the community at GEENIE, Chana, it like really resonates with me, because it's central to what you're about, and it's not like nice to have, just bolt on concept.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is like we're a startup, as you know. We just launched like last July, so I wouldn't say that we've figured it out. Like we're not, by all means, we're definitely not at like product market fit just yet, right? But part of the opportunities in community is actually to get there, right? Like if we're building a community and we're watching how that community interacts, and we're testing out, okay, well, what happens if we do this event, or what happens if we watch this conversation and not chime in. What happens if someone does X, Y, and Z, and then we do ABC. It's like it's a great way to kind of even build your business, because you're building it with like in the trenches, and actually watching how people are interacting with your messaging and with your products in real time.
Chana, you mentioned that you're a startup, and I know that you just recently raised some money, which we're very excited about. I was cheering. You didn't see me in this virtual space, but I was cheering for you. And can you share, what that experience was like, and how what you've learned from it, and learnings potentially for not only other entrepreneurs but also, investors, and particularly angel investors, and as we talk about access to power, as we talk about so many of these themes, like how do we be more intentional about the entrepreneurs we're supporting, the conversations we're supporting, and would love to hear your insights and experiences with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest thing from that is like, the first checks process is like lonely, and it can also feel like not like a big deal, right? Like, and there's not a lot of conversations around like your very first rounds, right? And like first checks cut and what that's like and how to do that, like how to get like the first one, two, three people to say yes, and invest in your company. There's not a lot of conversation around that. You often see like the big headlines when someone has raised $1 million, right? Or they've raised even 750,000, like some notable number that we know is going to have an impact on the business and its ability to move forward, right? We see those headlines, particularly as it pertains to women and as it pertains to Black women, because the stats around raising for Black women is just abysmal. Even though Project Diane noted that there's been an increase in the amount of Black women who've raised north of $1 million, right? I think now it's like over 150 or something like that, whereas before a few years ago it was like less than 100, right? So the number has increased, but it's still so very low, right? Like it's really, really ridiculously low. And so we know these, and at the same time we know that Black women are the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs and constantly um, coming up with new businesses and innovating and all that good stuff. So what I'm really interested in this new conversation that I'm now in around fundraising is like, how do we talk about how do you get from 0 to 1 million, like what does that look like for people, and how do we bring more visibility to those first few checks. And for me it was like, it it started off because someone actually sent an email to me and asked about investing, and actually they sent this email, they asked about investing, and the number that they mentioned to them seemed like an insignificant number. They're like, oh, if you're currently raising, like, hey, like, would you mind, like, if you're interested, like, I'd love to invest at this, like, I think she even said like, um my measly, like, like my measly whatever, right? And I was like, at the time I hadn't really, it was like the beginning of December, I think, or the late November, and at the time I had not raised um anything for Genie World, right? And so I was like, um yes, like, one, this isn't a measly sum to me because like I haven't gotten any yeses yet, and two, it was like a bingo to me because I was like, well, Chana, like, you know if this one individual is able to invest at this number, and this isn't a large number for her, imagine that there must be other people who also maybe might have an interest in investing in Genie and might be able to do, 5, 10, 15, 20K, whatever it is, like, who knows, right? And like, maybe you don't wait until, because at that point, and like, we had made this big pivot from one business to the other. We made that big pivot in July, and then we just ended up being in a whole new business. And at that point, we're 5 months in. Um, I self-funded that pivot. Our traction wasn't like huge, though it was significant, I suppose, but like it wasn't big enough to go out to like say, let's go do $1 million VC round. Like we weren't there yet. And so when it made me think about like, well, what if I were to just kind of break this down into um, what if I were to rethink my fundraising strategy and break this down into smaller bites? So, what would it be like if I just gave myself a goal of, raising under 200K in the next 30 days? And that's what I set out doing, and, I reached out to about 40 people on email. I broke that up into like two groups of people. One group of people who I knew were like active investors, and then the other group of people like I knew were investor adjacent. Like they just like they had friends that were angel investors, or they had friends that were VCs, and kind of dual path those conversations. And by the beginning of January, I had you know had people, I had investors that had committed, and I was like, okay, so you literally just did what you set out to do, and it was. I know that makes it sound easy. It definitely, and I will say it was much easier than I thought it was going to be, given all of the information that is out there around how hard it's going to rate, how hard it is to raise. That said, I realized that I had a couple of things working to my favor, which was one, I'm a super networked individual. This is like I've been an entrepreneur for 10 years. Genie World is like the second iteration of a former subscription box company. So I have a track record, I have a track record, not only in the work that I'm doing, but also in the space generally around like multicultural marketing and all other good stuff. So I had some of those things working for me, like my background, so it's like a founder market fit, plus my network, plus the like traction that we had did to date, that made it possible for me to close even a small round in 30 days. So yeah, I guess I don't know how to wrap up that thought there, but I guess I would just say that there are many ways to skin a cat, and like there's we shouldn't let like the statistics um, sort of stop us from going out there and capitalizing our businesses, because you need capital to move a business forward, whether that's through equity or loans or whatever have you. But there's no reason for Black women to be so under resourced when they have these huge, incredible businesses that can potentially impact millions of people.
Yeah, and I think in many ways, Chana, and thank you for sharing that story. I mean, it comes back to, what we were talking about earlier. It's community. You're networked. You're tapped into communities, many different communities that have shared visions and intent. It comes back to taking action, and using your privilege and power to create change. We need to be having these conversations, to be more intentional with what we have, and how we use that to create the future, right? Based on what has happened in the past, based on these systems and structures that have been so prevalent, that we see, the damage that they cause. Like, everyone here can take action, and it's exciting to to see your success, and to see I'm going to keep watching where you're going, but I'm also just incredibly inspired, by this conversation, because it brings this whole notion of entrepreneurship and businesses with purpose and community building, and customers, and just all the things that you're doing to the next level, which is really understanding the communities you serve, the help that they need, the support they need, the opportunities that they seek, and how you're using your experiences as an entrepreneur, your passion and talents to create that type of change that I hope more entrepreneurs go after. Chana, this has been a really important and inspiring conversation. I know that our listeners feel the same. If they want to learn more about you and your work and GEENIE, where should they go?
So best place to find us is at genie.world, and we're at Genie World on all social. We love hanging out on Instagram, so that's like our central. So that's just at Genie World. And then also, if you want to include, I do office hours on Friday afternoons after 3 o'clock. So if you want to include my office hours in the show notes, like the link to that, feel free to set up time to chit chat.
Thanks so much, Chana. It was a true pleasure to speak with you today, and looking forward to supporting you in the future and cheering on your success and amplifying your voice, because you are the change we need in this conversation. You're driving it, and it's wonderful to be able to share that.
Kristy, thank you so much for this opportunity. This was a very fun conversation.
Thanks so much for listening to Ellevate. If you like what you hear, help a girl out. Subscribe to the Ellevate podcast on iTunes. Give us 5 stars and share your review. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at EllevateNTWK, that's Ellevate Network. And become a member. You can learn all about membership and all the great things that Ellevate Network is doing at our website, www.ellevatenetwork.com. That's ELLEVATE network.com. And special thanks to our producer, Catherine Heller. She rocks. And to our voiceover artist, Rachel Griesinger. Thanks so much, and join us next week.
As a cloud leader at Deloitte, I get to work every day with innovators who don't just wonder what's possible, they engineer it with cloud. If you're one of those people, you'll like Deloitte's On Cloud podcast, where my co-host Mike Cavas and I talk with business leaders and explore how to use cloud to impact business models, revenue streams, workplace cultures, AI adoption, and more. Join me, David Linthicum, by subscribing to On Cloud, where you get your podcasts.